showing up. I'd like to remind you that if you wish to speak on an agenda item, please wait for an invitation from the board chair during that discussion. Comments on other school district matters, you may speak during the designated public comment period. Before speaking, state your name and keep remarks brief. Respectful conduct is expected at all times, and the chair may interrupt or end comments that are too long, off topic, inappropriate, or violate privacy rights. This is a school board business meeting held in a public setting. Thank you for cooperation and keeping it professional and on track. All right, we did the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll move down to number 2, which is reviewing and adopting this year's agenda.
I move we adopt the agenda as written.
I second it.
We do have a first and a second to adopt this agenda as written. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose? Moving on to the next item in the agenda, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to share brief comments of no more than 3 minutes on matters not listed on the agenda. Legal issues and complaints should follow the grievance process outlined in policy 1700. The board will not respond to comments during the meeting, as its role is to listen and consider public input rather than engage in discussion. Do I have any public comment at this time?
So we didn't get the MTSS on the board agenda, but in the future there will be an item there that I'll just type up for you to have each month based on what we're doing in MTSS and our PLCs. So just to kind of give you a brief background here, so I'm the local coordinator now for MTSS for Alberton School. Our grant is finished for MTSS, but we still have a coach that I meet with like once a month to help us continue implementing. Katie Cannon, Jess Menard, and I went to Bozeman to the 4-day conference, the Bozeman Institute this summer, and we brought back quite a few things actually. So one of the first things that we already have jumped into is changing the language on our signage with our universals to be more inclusive instead of directive. So instead of saying be respectful, be responsible, be safe, we are now writing we are respectful, we are responsible, and we are safe. Anna Schreck is helping us through a grant to purchase new signs that we're going to have posted up and around in the entryways and then outside on the fences as well to show those. And then we are working on our behavior matrices for all of the different areas within the school. So these are like what kids can expect, their expectations within those spaces. So what's expected here in the lunchroom, what that looks like for behavior for the different age groups. Gym, always bathrooms, the different classrooms. So we're breaking out to our PLCs between elementary and middle school and high school, and we're going to be working on those, and we'll get those printed and then laminated and posted in all the areas. So that's one of the big things that we're working on. And then the second one is that our big kind of number 1 goal for this year is to get all of our staff really informed and well versed in Tier 1 practices between our academics, our behavior, and social emotional. So that's kind of the year-long process that we're going to be having. It's just kind of the beginnings of it anyway. So good.
Nice work, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Do you have any other public comment?
Hey, I'm John Squire. Obviously, you guys know me. I was at the last meeting. I try to come to as many of these meetings as I can. We moved here 4 years ago and brought our sons here. Since moving here, we donate money, sponsor things, volunteer time, try to help this school. But apparently, sometimes when you have differences of opinions about things, it can be conflicted. I thought today I would come and help you guys become better board members by offering you some advice. The last meeting policy changing the academic requirements for athletics, I thought it would be counterproductive. And that's just my opinion. And obviously that conversation got a little bit heated. But the one comment that stuck out to me was that, you know, it needed to come to an end because obviously you weren't going to change my mind. I want you to understand that it's not your position to change mine or the public's mind when we have our opinions. It's to weigh on them, it's to think about them and then make your decisions for how to regulate this school and run your board. So I thought that would help. And then there was another comment you made that really concerned me when, you know, Ray had said that he didn't care for the grades, he doesn't care about the grades of the students, and I think it's abhorrent. It's a horrible representation for the board, for the chair member to be saying that he doesn't care for the grades, doesn't matter to him about the grades. That's, I can't imagine anybody that would, in the community that would still want him to be there. I think he should resign. I think he belongs where he's at, and that's just my opinion. You guys can land it however you want to, but obviously you had lots of issues amongst yourselves with, you know, things happening behind the scenes that nobody knew about, and now people know about it. I'm not at fault for those. I made some people aware of them. It's all just try to help make this school improve and do a better job of educating the community's children. Just because you graduated here, just because you have kids here, doesn't necessarily make you automatically eligible to sit in one of those chairs. Your responsibility is the children of this community and their education. This isn't a daycare, it's a public school system. I think you guys should do a little bit better job reflecting on your decisions in that manner.
Do you have any more public comment? Very good. Moving on to number 4, which is going to be approving minutes from 3 different meetings. First of which is from August 12th, 2025.
I move we approve the minutes from the August 12th, 2025 meeting.
I second that.
We do have a first and a second to approve the minutes from the meeting that occurred on August 12th, 2025. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose? Moving on to the meeting which occurred on August 18th, 2025.
I move we accept the meetings of the August 18th board meeting as presented.
Second.
We have a first and a second to approve the minutes from the meeting which occurred on August 18th, 2025. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose? Moving on to the meeting which occurred August 29th, 2025.
I move we accept the August 29th, 2025 minutes as printed.
I second that.
We have a first and a second to approve the minutes from the meeting which occurred on August 29th, 2025. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose? All right, moving on. Item number 5 is the approval of claims and warrants.
Who is Aptegi Incorporated?
Apogee is the subscription or yearly subscription for ThrillShare, and ThrillShare encompasses all of our platforms. It's a messaging. It's how we get our messaging out to the community and family. No, that's it. It's Aptigee. It's called Aptigee.
Okay.
For check number 19113, for Solace, is that how you say that? What is that?
That's high school science curriculum as well.
Okay. And what is Go Guardian?
Is our internet protection licenses,
Oh, okay.
and that's every 3 years.
Oh,
And the Savas is actually our, it's math, and there were yearly orders that that should have been placed, so we did that this summer. And so that's to go with the curriculum we already have. And the McGraw-Hill charge for 15,037.14, that's the high school science curriculum.
612. And we bought that for 612. Excuse me.
what is, under the payroll, what is Williams Investigation? What is that for?
It is a garnishment for a person.
Okay. I motion that we approve claims 19083 through 19127 for $70,077.30, and payroll 20089 through 20098, plus direct deposits for $166,154.
Any questions before you vote? Okay. We have a first and a second to approve claims 19083 through 19127 in the amount of $70,077.30, and payrolls number 20089 through 20098, plus direct deposits in the amount of $166,100.54. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? All right, moving on to our administrator's report, starting with superintendent.
Sounds great. Just a couple of facilities updates. We have been working with Temprite. They got the boiler started for us, and they will be out here weekly doing the skimming and checking that all out for us. And they are going to put a proposal together for us for overall maintenance to help our new maintenance people learn the filters, learn, the different things around the building. So we've been working, Matt and I have been working quite closely with them, and we should have that proposal before the October board meeting that we can discuss. McKinstry will be out here in probably 2 weeks. Their gentleman that's going to lead the project was gone in August, so they will be starting here real soon. I talked to Bob 2 days ago, so, or early Friday, sorry. Budget things real fast. We've got our Title I, our gifted and talented grants are all finished. I worked with Nathan last week. All of his CTE annual budget is taken care of with the different grants that we get for that. We dug even into the middle school now for some CTE money, part of the state funding stuff. And Betsy and I kind of went through all the salary stuff, where that comes from the different grants and those kinds of things, looking where we're at. To tie on to where Rachel was talking about with the MTSS stuff, our Montana Reads grant, we will be hiring a consultant that's part of the grant that we need to do. We'll actually have two. We'll have an elementary consultant and a high school consultant. Side-by-side consulting is who they are. And they are going to start work with us in October, and then they'll be out here to meet with all of the staff in January. And really looking at our Tier 1 explicit instruction, how can we really support all kids at the Tier 1 in the classroom? So excited to have them as part of the team there as well. We have 2 applicants for our behavior interventionist position for that teacher that left, so we will be interviewing next week for that, and hopefully have someone on staff in the next few weeks to get that position covered. We're still looking for more paras. Always, we'd like to have at least 1, but 2 more paras would be fantastic. We have a parent that grabbed an application, and so hopefully she's going to apply, and Katie Soares and I can do some interviews for that as well. Yes?
What about the parents that we had to let go in the spring? We had to do cuts and use it.
These extra ones will actually be paid out of Montana Literacy Grant. And so, is that what you're asking?
I'm asking like, could you offer it to them, the ones that we had to cut?
Oh, got you. It's posted on our website, so I am not quite sure who they are. I'm sure, but if I got an application, yeah, Betsy and I talk about that, and so, yep, they're open. So, one of them will work with the behavioral interventionist, and then another one will work in the special ed room with Katie in the K-8. She leads another, working with a couple of small groups. Homecoming, I have started working with the student council on homecoming. That will be the week of September 22nd through the 26th. So just to give you guys a heads up, we're going to do the orchard visit in the morning for the elementary kids, while the middle and high school kids work on their floats and get things together. The parade will be at 3 p.m. on September 26th. We've contacted the Sheriff's Department and Fire Department and those kinds of things, and a few other groups that are gonna bring floats too, I think. So we're gonna go down to the senior center later this week to see if we've got a few of them that would like to join us as well. So I will talk to you about that just a little bit. And then, of course, our game will be Friday night there. Volleyball girls will play on Thursday, and we'll do posters early in the week. All of the classes will be a part of that, and we'll get posters up before the volleyball game on Thursday. So it's been fun getting to know that middle high school, those student council kids helping me kind of put that together. So teachers have all joined a committee of their choice. We talked about that at the staff meeting. And so I'll be putting those together and really digging into what's the safety look like, sunshine, technology, curriculum, and some parent engagement things with some different staff members. We'll meet at least quarterly, and I'll share with you guys in my board reports each month with that, or each quarter once we meet on those. Comprehensive schools, I have a meeting tomorrow morning from 10 to 12 with OPI, our OPI consultant online. All of the comprehensive schools do a 2-hour meeting once a month, and just getting a little more clarity on some of the things that they need from us. And then our consultant from OPI will be here the following week, the following Tuesday. He'll be here from 9 to noon. So we'll be getting into some classrooms and just kind of looking over what our goals and our plans are for the year. So I'll keep you guys posted on both of those meetings as well. The other thing, I talked to Parker, just so you guys know, about some bandwidth things. In the 3rd grade classroom, they were having some issues, just the corner up there, not getting enough service to get their computers up and running. And the high school is seeing some of the same things with their interventions when a lot of the kids are testing at the same time. And so Parker was going to run some tests for me this week and see what we need to upgrade or what we need to do there to make sure that kids aren't kicked out halfway through their assessments. We did MAPS testing, and a number of kids almost finished and got kicked out and had to start all over. And so, we're hoping that we can figure out what that is, and, Betsy had said the one in elementary was pretty easy to update, so hopefully we can add a couple more points in the high school to make that a little bit easier as well. And Montana Reads Grant, I already talked about that a little bit. We'll meet with MTSS team October 16th, and then we'll do an all staff training on January the 16th is what it says on there. And so just our consultants coming in and really getting going on the grant and getting us some resources that we need to support kids and to support our teachers in their teaching. So it'll be a combination of things for the classroom, some curriculum, what they need to help make sure all of our kids are successful in the classroom. So we're all excited about that. And MTSS has been great about meeting with me, and we'll kind of tie those two grants together there. So, the other piece Betsy and I are working on is there's been some questions about job descriptions. So I went to Bia, and Bia gave me all of her job descriptions that she has across the board from me, custodians, Betsy, all of the teachers, paras, those kinds of things. So really looking at what that looks like for Alberton to make sure that we're covering. They know what their job description is, and so we'll have those out in the next week or so. And just over the weekend, we had another issue with the crow's nest. So that's an add-on to my report with the storm last night. The front, it's okay, all the equipment's okay and those kinds of things, but Matt had to go in and replace those boards and screw them a little differently because they all came out. So all the equipment is fine, but we'll really want to start taking a look at what we're going to do with that for next year. I think we can limp it through this football season, but it's going to have to be updated or replaced or something for next school year. So just to keep that in our minds. All the equipment, once we're done with football, we'll move that all inside, make sure it's good over winter, and then we'll just piece that together and see what we can do. Yeah. And I know we've all been talking about it already with some different things, but I just want to keep that in our forefront.
With that Reads grant, what's the expectation as far as like all systems go?
Really, so they're going to be with us. It's over the next 4 years, and they will look at our data with us, and we need to make sure we're assessing kids fall, winter, spring. They'll look at that data, they'll go through it with us. They will be in our classrooms to support teachers, giving teachers an opportunity to do some modeling for them. But as long as we show the growth, the things that we're putting in, I do reports monthly to Rachel Gott, is who runs the Montana Reads Grant at OPI. So her and I are talking, and I'm sending in, here's where we've started. And so it's really not a specific, like our test scores have to go this high, but we have to show that we're putting the work in. There is a training, the Science of Reading, that is really nationally looking at how we're teaching reading from the ground up. And so that is a training that's mandated by the grant, that all of our teachers will be a part of that training. And from that base training, what we'll do is then take K2, and they'll really get to look at what it looks like in kindergarten, and then we'll look at high school and across content areas, what does Science of Reading look like. So there are some surveys that we have to do on a regular basis annually. That's CNLA that we have to do for comprehensive also. And then they had to do a fall survey for the Science of Reading, what they know right now, and then after the training they'll take that again, and so that'll happen each year. Professional development, they really want to know what we're doing for professional development. They will look at our curriculum, as long as it's research evidence-based, work with us on how to best implement that. And then if we want new or looking at different things, help us pick some different things if needed. But our math and our reading are both brand new, so we're really, and as is our science. So, and all three of them are research evidence-based, so we're good to go, and so we can just build on those with supplementary curriculum. Excuse me. It's an amazing grant. I'm really excited for our teachers and for our kids, just the different opportunities it's going to give. We already started some money for all classrooms, just what would you like, what do you need to teach literacy, cross-aided contact. So a number of teachers have already taken advantage of that and gotten some new things for their classroom, which I think will be huge also for kids and adults both.
You guys have anything else? Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on to number 7, which is the
Good for
all of our
everybody.
fall sports are up and running. Volleyball is Superior tomorrow, and Regis on Wednesday. Football's will be, or this is the next one game, will be on Thursday this week at 7. And then thank you to the board for helping us work with Frenchtown. Our 7th and 8th grade boys have their first game that they can actually suit up tomorrow. So they'll be heading down to Corvallis for that. And our 6th grade boys are playing most of their games on Sundays now because it's through the Missoula Youth Football League. So that's all been going great. Robotics started today, so they have their first practice after school as well. So they'll start, and their competitions will start in November. And then I just thought it was cool, I ran the numbers, and 68% of our high school students and 56% of our middle school students right now are participating in fall sports and/or activities. So I thought that was pretty cool. And if there's anybody in the community that ever wants to help out, we're always looking for people at football games and volleyball games for some small stipended positions to do chain gang, to do scoreboard, announcing, things like that. So if anyone's ever interested in doing that, just shoot me an email.
Thanks, Tracy.
All right, down to number 8, we have discussion action agenda. First of which is going to be out-of-district students. On here is the proposal to accept 2 out-of-district students who have previously been students in Alberton, and then also to acknowledge students attending out-of-district.
Three, right?
3.
So you're proposing that we approve the in-district?
All 3, yeah.
Okay. And out-of-district, do you guys have any questions about that at all? Last time you had a little graph, we don't have a little graph this time?
No, I didn't put together, I don't have a little spreadsheet. They're previous students, 2 elementary and 1 high school.
Okay.
And so they're just pending approval
Okay.
to re-enter this year.
And as far as the acknowledgement of students attending out-of-district, anything new there?
Those are just signatures that I'll need from you that came from other schools. It's paperwork, yeah.
Okay.
I move we approve the acceptance of 2 out-of-district students who have previously been here, and acknowledge that you still have too many in-district students than out-of-district.
I second that.
All right, we have a first and a second to accept the 2 out-of-district students.
It's actually 3, so it's 2 elementary and 1 high school.
We have a first and a second to accept the 2 elementary out-of-district students and the 1 high school out-of-district students who have previously been students here in Alberton, and then also to acknowledge all those students who are attending out-of-district schools. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect. Next is going to be approval of a student club, which is going to be Lego Robotics, with club supervisor, Mr. Nathan Morris.
You want me to talk about it?
I would love that.
So, robotics is alive and kicking here. So, as mentioned, we just had the first tech challenge practice today. For the elementary Lego robotics, we just decided to kick that off at the tail end of the summer. We found a couple mentors. So, one of them is going to be Dr. Destiny Clark. She is a psychiatrist who has worked with kids a lot and has a lot of experience to bring to that. She's also pretty techy, so that'll be fun. She's going to take the 4th through 6th graders for First Lego League Challenge, it's called. And that does have competition in Missoula in till end of January. And then if they were to qualify, they would move on to state in Bozeman, although it's pretty competitive because there's over 100 teams in the state. The other one is grades 2 to 4, First Lego League Explore. And Ms. Sammy Stewart, our 6th grade teacher, is going to mention that. And so I am just kind of, as the one who's been doing robotics here, I'm kind of acting as the coordinator and helping them get going, but they're going to run the day-to-day stuff at their club. They'll probably meet once a week school or possibly like a Friday or something, so you see what works for them. Any questions about it? Oh, the younger one doesn't complete it all days. Both of them are pretty structured curriculums. They have a really engaging, cool like curriculum. They build Legos, they build robots. They have certain challenges they do. There's a lot of really awesome first core values that the organization first has, and they really work well with our school's core values as well. So really excited about that, and then also there's a lot of educational value to it, teaching STEM as well. So pretty cool opportunity.
Will this eventually feed into your robotics?
Yeah, that is an awesome opportunity that can come from it, is that these kids will be already well prepared and able to jump into my program. First Tech Challenges for 7th through 12th grade, and we have Skills USA as well, but the idea is that they'll already have some of the ideas about programming, although they program kind of in a simpler block method, and then also just like generally how to build a robot, how to follow the engineering design process, and how to like keep an engineering notebook and all of that. So yeah, there are a lot of skills that transfer as they move up, and so that would mean that we could just keep growing, keep doing even cooler things, like winning nationals for Skills USA and taking silver. So,
Given that, this sounds like a no-brainer, even if it ultimately costs us a few dollars here and there down the road. So I move we accept the Alton Panther Lego Robotics Club.
All right, we have a first and a second to approve the Lego Robotics Club as proposed here in this board packet. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Congratulations, Nick. Thank you.
He gets a stipend for robotics. This is a new club, so there's no stipend in the CBA for this. That would have to be put into the CBA, or a memorandum of understanding would have to be added. How do we do that?
I'm not sure that required work in the union. So I'm willing to do that.
That comes from the union.
Can I
But
mention
Sammy's
something?
on
Right
the
now,
side, right? So she would
Sammy
pay
and
that
Dr.
side.
Clark are just working on a purely voluntary basis. Dr. Clark probably only wants it to be a voluntary basis. As far as Sammy and I are concerned, we're understanding that currently what our role is we're not necessarily pushing for an immediate stipend or anything like that, but what we are going to do is kind of track our hours and have like a good thing that we can show at the end of the year, and maybe we could consider something like that going forward. Not that I would turn down something soon, but I do have a stipend and is possibly a little bit low for the number of hours I have, but I'm going to keep better track of that and report that this year.
And our Montana Reads grant, we actually built CTE into it and STEM, just content across the grade level, or content across, literacy across content backwards. So that's something, if we dig into that a little bit further, maybe since there's no general fund money that we have floating around, maybe that's something we can look into to see how we can build that into. So I'll look into that a little closer.
All right, moving on, we have a presentation from Mr. Curtis Cochran, House District 90, and House of Representatives.
Just introduce yourself, that's all you got. No, we wrote you in there, but I just knew you wanted to introduce yourself, correct?
Yeah.
That's it?
I came to see Kelly's presentation. I'm Kurt Cochran from St. Regis, I'm the state representative from Frenchtown to Paradise, our district. But, Kelly gave Patton gave me a heads up about this strategic thing, so I want stopped a few weeks ago and visited with them, and I'm pretty familiar with what's going on. St. Regis, we're pretty in the same boat. And I am not on the education committees, in the interim right now, I'm on the transportation committees. During the session, I was on local government and state admin. But I did a bunch of research today. If any of you want to look at, and thank Mr. Chair for announcing it, members of the board, if you're familiar with that Legmont website, you can look at all the interim, there's a lot of work going on right now in the interim committees. There's two major education committees working right now. The one is the school funding interim commission and the education interim budget committee. And I think one of them meets tomorrow at 8:30. But you can zoom in on those. Plus, there's a place you can click on what they've talked about at the last couple meetings. It's really a lot of good information, and that's where I get my information. I looked at today what they were working on. It shows some really good history of school funding in Montana back to 1985 when they passed the School Equalization Act. I mean, when I was a kid, the disparity between the small school districts and the big ones was so bad. Finally, it took a lawsuit in 1985 to change that, and they passed that School Equalization Act to equalize. You know, whenever you see those budget, they always use Ennis, Montana and Superior, Montana as a comparison. Madison County has a tax base of 55 million. Mineral County has a tax base of 1.5 million. The two schools are identical size amount of students, kids, everything, but they use that comparison. That's how lopsided it was until we got that 95 mil deal. And the one thing we all agree in the legislature is how confusing, how complicated, and how screwed up Montana's funding is for our schools. So they're working on it, and I do have some contact information. Call Dave Beatty, he's the legislator from Hamilton, he's the chair of both those committees. And I mean, he's a longtime school board guy from Hamilton, and really dedicated to Montana education, especially rural schools like us.
And appropriations as well.
Right, and he's on appropriations. And we're obligated by law, there's two things the legislature, the Montana Constitution, by law, the legislature must provide a free, equitable education for all kids. The other one is to pass the budget every 2 years. Those are the only two things by law the legislature has to do. So myself, and I know Senator Bowlby, we take it pretty serious, our job. Rural schools like where I live in St. Regis is the heart and soul of our town, so it's pretty important to us too. So get on that Legmont deal and catch up with what those guys are doing. You can zoom in, you can comment, and then they're, like I say, you can click back and see what they've already talked about. There's a bunch of good information. There's a lot of good stuff that might help you guys going forward. So that's about it. Thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Superintendent.
Thank you.
I have a question. Funding for schools is so important. Why did you guys put $1 billion back in savings funds instead of giving it to schools like Hamilton?
You're talking about the Gold Trust?
I'm talking about, the trust funds that you guys put $1 billion.
Gold Trust, I'm not sure if it's going to go. There's all the funds that we reinvest, that we're investing for future funding.
But it's
a
needed now.
conservative approach.
It's needed now. If you really support the schools, you should probably help organize for that where it's needed now.
The money that we put up there, $100 million funds.
It's $1 billion. Yeah, we're just saying the ball.
I don't know, it's pretty complicated issue.
It's not that
I can show you. I can show you.
Do you support school choice?
What?
Do you support school choice?
Choice.
Like, where kids can go to whatever school they want? Did you vote for school choice?
I'm not sure if I did or not. Which one? There's a bunch of bills.
I would think that would be one you would know off the top of your head.
Could you have a discussion after meeting? This is a school board meeting.
Well, this is relevant to the conversation. It's not as important that we understand. These schools need money, and you're part of the legislation. And you put $1 billion in savings for the.
We'll get back to the meeting now. Thanks for coming out, Curtis.
Thank you.
next presentation is Hatton Litton.
Thank you, Chair Fredette. If it's okay with y'all, I'm gonna stand up here so I can advance the slide deck, and I can also look at y'all and not have my back to you. If I speak like this, can you hear me in the back okay? Okay, thank you. So my name's Hatton. I've visited with a lot of you so far. The board signed a contract with me back in the spring to conduct a strategic plan. And the first part of that strategic plan is always to help me as your consultant and the community together wrap your arms around your current reality so you know what it is you're currently dealing with, so you can create strategic goals and priorities around what you want to do about that to get to your big opportunity, long-term envisioned future. So what I have to present to the board tonight and to the members of the community that are here is that phase of the research, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit about our next steps and what the next workshop should look like. Does that sound okay to y'all? So the board members received in your packets a long narrative report with all this information, and I'll go through highlights for the folks that are here. And the superintendent and your business manager have a copy of that report as well, so I'm sure if people want to request the narrative report, they could do that. There are small cards that I had on the table that looks like a lot of people hold that have some of that data summary. So quickly, I started this research in May with a survey that went out to families, staff members, as well as out-of-district families, in-district families that are choosing to attend school outside of your school district. So we had a very large list in that survey. And then I continued throughout the summer with focus groups and interviews. So that's the body of information that builds up what you're going to hear today. And it was just under 200 people that were included in that process. So that includes survey respondents, that includes 2 occasions with your senior citizens group at lunches, the city council meeting that Superintendent Sear and I attended, as well as interviews and a focus group with your high schoolers. So I thought we'd start with academic data. It's really helpful, since that's the business you're in, to say, how are our kids doing? This data largely came from the district's application for that Montana Reads grant that you heard Superintendent Sear talk about earlier. So I realize this is a little far away for you guys to see in the back. Essentially, in Smarter Balanced Math and Reading, students are not quite at the state average, and in math, significantly below the state average for their proficient and advanced groups. When it comes to K-12 MAPS, that was the testing that Superintendent Sear referred to, which is happening more frequently throughout the year. That's not just once a year. Students are at 37% proficient in math, 38% proficient in reading. Those were last year's scores. And when it comes to your high school students in that MAPS testing, 55% of your high school students were proficient or advanced in MAPS reading, and 37% proficient or advanced in MAPS math. So that's both a comparison of like multiple times a year dipstick type assessments, as well as end of the year assessments like SBAT. 27.5% of your students are supported by an IEP. That means they're receiving support from your special education staff. About 85% of your students are seeking the support of your school counselor, whether that's tier 1, 2, or tier 3. And when it comes to attendance, and this is something that I know the district is trying to focus on, right now you've got 37% of the students that are attending regularly. So I think I've got a repeat of some MAPS data there. Oh, sorry. I misstated that. I think this is in the wrong column. When it comes to attendance, and this is averaging how many of your students are attending 95% of the time, 14% of your elementary students are, 21% of your middle school students, and 13% of your high school students are attending school 95% of time on average. And that is below the state average, which is at about 33%. When it came to students who were identified in high school as college and career ready, that was a 33% mark compared to the state level at 62%. And again, all this data came from the grant application that the school district completed at the end of last year. When it comes to your ACT data, your students are actually beating the state odds when it comes to those nearing proficiency. You've got 50% nearing proficiency, which is just under double what the state average would be. 30% in ELA, excuse me, that first stat was math. And then their science scores are closer to the state average when it comes to nearing proficiency. 40% are nearing proficiency there. You're proficient and advanced on ACT scores, and again, that's for your juniors, are trending a little bit below state average, but not significantly in both categories. When it comes to other things that make up your students' academic day here at Alberton, after school clubs and activities, I heard in the research a lot of the qualitative comments where we don't have enough going on for our students. And yet, you do have this large list of MHSA sports, as well as Business Professionals of America and First Tech Challenge Robotics and Skills USA for your high school group. Your middle school group has flag football, volleyball, basketball, track and field, robotics, and Skills USA. And then you have the second through sixth grade first Lego League that we already heard about earlier in the meeting. And then some co-curricular activities that are not governed by like eligibility for MHSA. So drama, art club, gardening club, and French club. So that's a little bit of what's available to your students and how your students are doing. When it comes to your infrastructure, your facility, that's another thing we have to look at with your current reality. And as you heard from Superintendent Sear, we're waiting for McKinstry to complete their assessment and report, but their findings will be really important to the community so you understand what needs to happen to your physical plan. Your financial position. So this is always fascinating. So your general fund budget is around $2 million. Your total budget is around $3.5 million. And that includes your transportation fund, your tuition, your retirement, adult ed, technology, and building reserve. So all in a $3.5 million annual budget. Your levy capacity, what you could ask your taxpayers to vote to tax themselves in addition to that, is $97,000. So you could go from a $3.5 million to essentially a $3.6 million if your school district, if your board asked for that full amount. Your bonding capacity right now is $12 million. And then I did highlight, because this is such a big topic, your out-of-district student cost, essentially the tuition that you're paying to other school districts for students who live within your boundaries to go to another district, is about $75,000 a year. And then the revenue that you're getting from students who live in other districts but choose to attend Alberton is just over $25,000 a year. So those are two nice markers to understand that yes, you are losing students and you would like to get them back, and you have some small revenue, about a third of that amount coming in, tuition being paid by districts like Frenchtown, Superior, and Missoula to your district. I just wanted to highlight, you guys recently did something very historic in your community, and you passed an operating levy for the first time in recorded history. That's the way it's been said to me. You had a 72% yes vote. That's amazing. That's an astounding mark of support. To fund that levy, your taxpayers that have an assessed value of $100,000 a year on their property are paying about $13 a year to fund that levy. Those that have a $600,000 assessed value are paying about $80 a year to fund that levy. So I thought I'd just show you comparison numbers. If the district needed to access the full bonding capacity to do infrastructure improvements to your physical plant, if you needed to pass a $12 million bond to do what you want to do in this building. That would cost a taxpayer with a $100,000 assessed value $234 annually. And with a $600,000 assessed value, it would cost them about $1,400 annually. So that just sort of puts things into proportion for you so you understand your current reality when it comes to finances. The numbers on that bond information came from this graphic, which was provided to the school by your bond counsel, D.A. Davidson. Is it still Dan Simmons or is it someone else?
The last time we talked, it was Dan Simmons.
Yeah, and Dan knows everything about bonding in Montana, school bonds. Okay, so community engagement. Let's just wrap our arms around your 2020 census data. And this is, the top part is just about those who live in the town of Alberton, about 452 individuals in 230 households. Median household income about $71,000. High home ownership rate, especially compared to averages, 79.1% home ownership rate and a 75% employment rate. So that's within the town of Alberton. I realize the school district spans a much broader swath of area. I was able to get some data from the Missoula County GIS folks just to get a better sense of what kind of properties exist in your school district boundaries. So you had 867 dwellings on their records. So that includes cabin, multifamily, single family, mobile homes, as well as these categories like residential and general generic. So we'd have to really dig into that to understand, but it's nice to understand what makes up your tax base if you have to think about who's actually paying on a $12 million bond if you went in that direction. So 867 what would be considered dwellings, and then 39 what would be considered commercial or retail sites or energy or utility facilities. So that's based on county GIS data. Yes, sir?
Yeah, the way you have it specified, you have Missoula and Mineral County, so that 867 combines both of those.
Yes, sir, because this district spans both counties, so thank you for that clarification. Okay, let's keep going. You've got organizations that support the school, the PTSA and PEAK. You've got a variety of family engagement strategies like open houses and barbecues that happen at the beginning of the year, and then some planned engagement that can be funded through this Montana Reads grant. A family Thanksgiving meal came up in the research as one of the core traditions that binds this community together. But there's the hope to do more in terms of family literacy nights, STEM nights, reading under the lights, neat things that will get families into the school and really working together on their students' academic achievement. And then there's also a hope to encourage families to do what you're doing tonight, which is come to board meetings and get involved. The reality is, and I didn't say this at the beginning at the overview, some of this information can be sometimes tough to swallow, like, oh, we want our kids to be 100% in every category. And we do, and they will get there. And the reality is the way they're gonna get there is with all of you guys banding together. That's the critical thing that came out of the research is a lot of people, when I asked, what's your vision for this district? What do you want? What's the big opportunity? People spoke about the heyday of the district, when all the staff knew each other and their kids were going to school here and you had 225 kids in the school, and that afforded a wide range of academic content classes and electives for students as well as clubs. And the reality is the way to get back to that is largely through what was happening then too, where everybody, all hands on deck, were invested in the district. So one of my biggest findings is it's going to take a broader breadth of individuals carrying that load. Okay, let's keep going just on current reality. Staff development, you've heard a little bit about the MTSS work that's happening. Professional learning communities meet weekly to collaborate and support students. And then you have this new $1 million, I thought it was a 5-year grant, I apologize, it's a 4-year grant that's funding a significant amount of professional development in the school. So the cards that I put out highlighted a lot of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I would love to highlight a few for you so I don't have to read the whole list off to you. Across the board, the research identified the top strength that people say right away is our small class size. And what that creates in the sense of communal feeling, in the sense of attention to the students, in the sense of positive connected relationships between youth and adults. So that is identified across the board as a huge strength that the district holds and something that people essentially want to maintain and protect. The strong STEM and robotics program and industrial arts program was identified. Your House member turned to me and said, hey, out of Alberton, Montana, those kids won silver in a national competition. Well, yeah, they did. More people need to know about that. Other things that I found as strengths as a third-party researcher, your parents and community tend to support this school even across ideological divides. So it's also listed in the threats, but we as a country are at a place where our ideological divides seem really upfront and on the surface and can get in the way of our ability to do things together. Yet in this research, I found that folks from all different backgrounds and perspectives have a shared value of supporting this school and bringing it back to its heyday. That's a huge strength, that's not paralyzing you. And people also wanted to identify the scratch-made healthy food served in the lunch program as a gigantic asset and strength. Other big strengths, great youth in the community, great teachers working in the school, a superintendent who even before she was hired wrote this grant and won $1 million grant for the school district, who at back to school night said, hey, I'm a person with a lot of staying power. That's important to this district after the kind of transition that you've had in both your teaching and your administrative personnel ranks. Other big opportunities that are strengths are the fact that your students, even in a rural community, can access dual credit classes at zero cost or a very low cost, given the status of the school and the number of students who are experiencing poverty. They can also do the same through the Montana Digital Academy, so that's your high school age kids. You are implementing new ELA and math curriculum, and this year that staff level turnover has changed as well. You only have one new staff member on your certified side. Okay, this I thought was a lovely quote from a grandparent that I interviewed. If it hadn't been for Alberton School, my grandson wouldn't be the person he is today. He has social anxiety, and the small school gave him opportunities to be involved. In a bigger school, they wouldn't even know he was around. So that just sort of encapsulates an essence of what people see as core strengths in this community. Weaknesses. We already talked about the academic performance. So compared to state average, Alberton students are not at the same level that some of their peers are, and you have plans to get them there. The school is identified in comprehensive school improvement status K through 12, and the high school is in a position where it could be shifted to rigorous action for next school year. That's a more intensive level of support and intervention from the Office of Public Instruction, essentially to help change things and get student outcomes turned around. Is there anything else you want to say about that or correct what I said?
Nope, that's great.
Okay. Students are wanting more engaging work. That was a comment that was coming out of more middle school and high school level. Some community members are concerned about how much screen time students are spending while they're in school, and interestingly enough, the high school focus group also presented that. The students said themselves, we want more paper-based learning, and they thought that it might be a decision based on funding, that at some point last school year there was a decision to save money on paper and so everything went digital. I have no idea if they're accurate, but it was nice to hear high school students say, hey, I don't want to be on a device all the time. There are definitely, in the qualitative research, comments started coming in about challenges happening when students get to high school with academic rigor and student outcomes. I want to highlight for you now that came from the qualitative data. you can see from the quantitative data that I presented earlier, there are academic outcome challenges that are happening even starting in your lower grades. Certainly, you guys are very aware of it, the loss of students. Between kindergarten, when kids start, and 12th grade, the school is experiencing this attrition. The class of 2024 was 12 students at graduation, but when they started as a cohort in kindergarten, they were 23, so close to double that size. So that is a weakness and a challenge that has to be overcome, and essentially trying to get back the 60 students that the district needs to fill its building to be at full operating budget. What else do I want to highlight under weaknesses? Other weaknesses, and I spoke to this, there's some limited community involvement. And what I mean by that, this is standard across the world, right? This is what happens is a core group of people shoulder all the leadership tasks and all the volunteer tasks and things like that. It's that much more pronounced in a small community. And so there's a danger of burnout when we can't get a wider breadth of folks saying, I can fill in, I can do that role, I'm really interested in that. And someone else says, sure, I can serve in this capacity, but it's gonna take the whole community wrapping their arms around it, both to address the issues, but also to keep any one staff member, any one administrator, any one board member, any one community member from burning out and having to carry the load too much by themselves. Students identified some issues with Wi-Fi, and you heard from Superintendent Sear earlier that that's been at least identified for your technology partner. That's just an infrastructure issue that can be solved, but needs to be certainly for their student experience. And then I would also highlight there are negative reputation issues that people were very aware of and also spoke to in the research that need to be overcome to get families on board and back in and committed to the school district. Okay, this would summarize sort of the negative reputation issue, this feeling of the school can't get out of its own way, it's got problem after problem, and when it can, then there's a funding problem. You know, there's a bigger issue that's not of your making that creates an obstacle for you. Okay, threats. So these are things external to the district, but things you have to be aware of. So I want to highlight first and foremost that what you're seeing in declining enrollment has to do with some real factors that are connected to your school district and more than that. Generally, there's a decline in birth rates. So demographics of K through 12 student enrollment are going down. So you guys are not part of an isolated problem here. There was some of my research that indicated, now Montana's only at, I think the average was like 0.4% across a 5-year trend down in public school enrollment, whereas other states are seeing way higher disenrollment from public schools. But this statistic blew my mind. 2/3 of our nation's public schools are seeing declines in enrollment. So this is part of a bigger trend that is beyond just what you can control in your building. There are certainly concerns about the ability to grow development in Alberton and how it's limited by your current capacity of the town's sewer system. External threats also include this misperception. This came out of the survey, but also in the focus groups and interviews. A misperception that some of the big national headline issues, DEI, books in kids' libraries, bathrooms for transgender students, inappropriate content, age-inappropriate content, that these kind of national headline issues are problems happening in your school. And that's just a misperception. That's just people need to understand more about what life looks like in your classrooms. And then certainly funding issues that are beyond what you're capable of solving just by passing operations levies and bonds. Some other big threats, there aren't a lot of large employers in town other than the school. There's geographic isolation in the community, and a large amount of federal land makes up the tax base in the county. So there's just a limited amount of sort of economic development expansion. The community has changed significantly in the last 10 to 50 years outside of the school's walls. And other interesting issues, this is an external threat that's important to think about in a rural area. I used to live in a rural area with this problem. Things like the response time of your local emergency service personnel, like your sheriff, if there were an emergency at the school. So finding ways to improve those kinds of resources, because that's outside of what you can control. Okay, opportunities. This is where things get really exciting. Largely, this is where your community, when I said, what do you envision for this school's future? People described the school district in its heyday. The school district that some of them even attended themselves. You know, a full school, 225 kids, a rich array of academic classes, electives in the high school, and a variety of programs after school, and people being invested in the school. So what people did not say is really crazy harebrained ideas like, I think we should just close it down, you know, and consolidate. I think I got one or two of those comments. So I won't say they got made, but largely the body of evidence is people believe in the heyday of what this school has experienced and want to get back to that. That's the big vision and opportunity that people want to move back to. You have a great opportunity in seeking to have more administrative stability, in seeking to maintain those important, close relationships that people spoke about in your strengths. And certainly there is some new development happening in town. As part of the research, I interviewed the gentleman that's developing the Mercantile down the street. And he's an individual that's done some housing development in Missoula as well. And he spoke about the position that Alberton will find itself in, even in the midst of what's planned to be 4,000 new homes around the Y in the next 5 years, or in the next 50 years. I misspoke, sorry. He spoke about Alberton having a strategic advantage in terms of having fewer regulations than a Missoula County community would, and easier ability to build. And Alberton being an attractive place to build some high-density housing. So I want to highlight that for you because there are people looking at Alberton externally saying, hey, I want to do business there. It's a great community, it's a great town, and it has a lot of potential that's right-sized. So this truly is a pivotal moment for you to come together around your vision and actually try to stabilize a broad swath of support for it. Other things that did come up in the research, I said there were a few small indications of, hey, we should just consolidate and that's the best possible opportunity for us, but that was not the consensus. There were even ideas like building modern STEM facilities that are community-based resources to the community. Generally across the board, this is the top bullet point on this screen, your stakeholders really want to see your district thrive, not just survive. They want to see the range of opportunities for youth that leave high school in this school district so that they're set up for success to thrive, not just get by and get a job. That's what your community hopes for. This quote, I would say, summarized that sentiment. Just this idea of let's bring back the Panther spirit. So what's next from here? So I've given you an overview of what our current reality is. We next want to move into the phase of saying, as a community, board members and community together, the next workshop that I would like to host, and you'll see the dates, possible date options on the next screen, is to start identifying community goals and priorities. What are the top things that we'd like to see the administrators, the board, and the staff of the district tackle first? And what are we as a community willing to stand right behind them and commit to ensure their success? So at that workshop, usually there would be less than a quorum of the board present, but we want board members present. The community would be present. We would probably do it in this room. We'd have the cafeteria tables down, and we would workshop. We'd say, okay, we know what our current reality is. We know what our issues are. What are the top ways that that we need to address that. And have your community's input on a prioritization that we can put in front of the staff to say, okay, staff, here's your community's input, here's your board's input. Now we have to ground truth this with what's possible and actually write SMART goals, which are time limited, which have people assigned to them, they're measurable, and they're achievable goals. You know, we want big, hairy, audacious ideas that we want to get to, but in the meantime, we've got to have real, attainable, achievable things that your students and your staff can accomplish together. So the goals for that next meeting, as I described, we want a diverse group of community members. We want to ground ourselves in that current reality that I just presented. And we want to see our long-term envisioned future together, that heyday of the Alberton School District that people are unified around, and spend that time identifying our top priorities for the next 3 to 5 years, of how we're going to make progress towards that. So what I'd like to do is come back to town in October or November and do an evening workshop with you, probably about 90 minutes, and it would be active. You know, instead of the community listening to a report and making public comment, we would all be intermingled at tables with chart paper, working on plans and creating top priorities for action. So we would all together be making this happen. So I have some dates that are possible, and what's really important is that Superintendent Sear and the board work together to identify an evening that you think will work around your school athletic schedule. That's well after homecoming, so we won't interfere with that. Worrying about the 4-day weekend around MEA days, that kind of thing. So you have options. And then once we get those priorities, I bring that to Superintendent Sear. We work together with the staff in November and December on SMART goals, and then hopefully present it to the board in December or possibly January, depending upon our timing. Are there any questions from the board?
What was your general overall impression of the respondents, I guess, in terms of the percentage of our town or the percentage of the people that you solicited?
When I added it all together and got just under 200, I was like, huh, that's like half the town. You know, I didn't have one-on-one conversations with half the town, but half those people in some way understand that this process is happening and had an opportunity to give input. Now that's of the town of Alberton. Remember, you've also got 867 dwellings. I have no idea how many human bodies are represented by that. But I feel confident that you have a wide variety of individuals who have given their input from a wide variety of perspectives. You know, people who wanted to lean hard into the laundry list of concerns and complaints, and people who also wanted to say, hey, I believe in this district and what it can be and what I've seen it be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. 50%'s huge.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And what it's going to take is sustained community pressure. Like, it's the same strategies that helped you guys successfully pass your operating levy. You know, door-to-door conversations, phone calls, going to your senior lunch with your students is a great idea. Staying in front of the community, making sure that the school board and the town council are communicating with each other as shared leaders of the community so that it's constantly on everybody's mind. This is a together effort. Your current reality is not going to change with just status quo effort. And as a consultant, I get to come in and say that, and people can be angry at me for saying that, but that is the truth. It's going to take all of us together saying, hey, we believe in this and we care, which is what your respondents said. If I had had crickets, then I would have said, boy, you got a bigger problem here. Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to take that much time. Shall I just close this?
Be great.
Got a question now.
Oh, yes, sir.
Real quick, is that going to be available? Hillary didn't make it tonight, and I'm not going to be able to repeat all that.
Yeah. So the superintendent and your business manager have the slides,
Okay.
the long narrative report, and the infographic that I printed out, and there's some copies around, so I think you could go through them to get a copy. Yes, sir. And I'll bring it back to the next workshop too.
Thanks, Adam, I appreciate that. That's good. All right, let's go on to number 5 here. We have a presentation from the Upper 7 Law Firm.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting me tonight. My name's Andre Saladin. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing in Montana since 2010. Currently work at Upper 7 Law, which is a public interest law firm in Helena. And we were invited tonight to talk with you all about school funding, which seems to be the topic of the night. What I'd like to do is give you a little bit of sort of a high level of some school funding things that we're seeing. The ask that we are making of districts that we talk to and hear from and answer questions is ultimately whether they're interested in signing on to a potential lawsuit against the state of Montana for unconstitutional school funding, which we believe has very long implications based on the current funding system in place since 2009. Let me just tell you a quick background about myself. I worked for the state of Montana for about 12 years. I worked a number of different hats in my role as an assistant attorney general. I worked for the Department of Administration, Department of Corrections. I was on the Helena City Commission for 8 years as well, so I can advise with local government measure issues and all of the needs and not only the services. I am going to give you a very high level, and I apologize for some of you that may be way too high level, and for some of you, you'll want to go more granular. I'm happy to answer questions and stop as we talk, or we can wait till the end. If you all would like to have further discussions that are specific to Alberton, I think at the end of the meeting or at the end of our discussions, we should talk about potentially a closed session for specific litigation purposes. But I think for now, if you guys would like to have that sort of high-level conversation with everyone. Wonderful. I wrote down a couple of comments while Hatton was speaking. Thrive, not just survive. I think it was your status quo isn't going to change. Something with your status quo system. You are not going to thrive. Schools in Montana are not going to thrive. And we're out of Montana. You're not going to be able to change your status quo if you're unhappy with the status quo or just want that status quo to be better. You're happy with what you got and you want to do more with the status quo circumstances. So let's take a trip back to the 1980s. You had the case of Helena Elementary, and the representative spoke about that, and he was up here before. But what you had was districts where the rich got majority or got poor, essentially, or your education was dictated right by the zip code that you were born into. You could not afford that new building, right? You couldn't afford those curriculum programs. And these weren't fancy programs, right? These were questions of, are we going to have a language program? Are we going to have STEM programs? Are we going to have music in our schools? Right? Not bells and whistles, things that we would think of the standard curriculum. Right? So Helena Elementary looked at the equitable funding questions in our state and said we would change. And there was. Shortly thereafter, there was another lawsuit. The legislature stepped in and made more tweaks. In the legal sense, what we call moot that lawsuit. Essentially stopping the lawsuit from going forward because the problems that they said were, the lawyers said were present, the school district said were present, were fixed. This happened 1 or 2 more times until we fast forward to the early 2000s when we have the Columbia Falls litigation. And so that was an equitable funding under the City of Helena case. How is the money being shaken out, right? Why does Ennis get all of this money? Why does Alberton not? And Alberton actually made a cameo appearance in Helena Elementary case, highlighted as one of the districts, right, that had such a low overall value per student in comparison to those districts. Fast forward to Columbia Falls. Now we're talking about your free quality public education. Okay? Are we providing for our children what the Montana Constitution says we have to have for them? What the Montana Supreme Court said was, I don't really know, because the legislature hasn't bothered defining what quality education is going to be. So there's a problem here. You guys need to go back and need to define it. Then you've got to figure out whether or not you're funding it properly to provide that quality education for students. So the legislature went back and created 29309, which is largely state, that's the funding statute. It's largely the statute, defining what quality education is. Statute's largely stayed in the same place since that time. And identified like 8 standards that the state of Montana has an obligation to fund to ensure quality free public education for all of our students. Minimum accreditation standards. Are you hitting those bare minimums that OEI is telling you you need to hit on a regular basis? Educational programs for special needs students. Right? And you think of often we just lump that in with special education. Right? But we're talking about gifted, talented, we're talking at-risk students, we're talking about multilingual learners, American Indian education content. Qualified and effective teachers, administrators, and staff. Facilities and distance learning technologies to meet your accreditation standards. Transportation. A procedure to assess and track local student achievement. And the preservation of local control. So the state then, and this is what the legislature said, coming out of Columbia Falls, is required to design a funding mechanism so that you guys can take care of that for your student, for your local needs, for your local district, right? By looking at things for students, whether it's rural or urban, special needs of American Indian students, and the legislature has to determine the costs of what it's going to cost the district to cost the state to provide those services. How many studies has the legislature done that have identified all of those areas? Very, very, very few. We can talk about a few of them where they actually have. Then, once they study those costs, they're actually supposed to fund your system based on those actual costs. But if you don't study it, how do you ascertain whether or not you're funding it properly? So it's not really clear that the state's done a true assessment of NDPs, especially within, say, the last 5 years, right? But we're talking about almost 17 years ago at this point. So let's look at a couple of these areas. Accreditation. When I traveled around the state and talked to districts, talked to their superintendents, when we talk about accreditation, when we talk about curriculum, what I hear is the first thing to go, curriculum. Maybe it's not required, maybe you don't have to do music, maybe you don't have to do STEM. Maybe you can teach the same textbook you were teaching 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You've got the materials, you train your staff. So those are the things that slip behind, right? When we start looking at those accreditation standards. What does it cost to implement new accreditation for your district? There's new math standards that are going to come online next year for all districts in the state. The Office of Public Instruction did a study that said it's going to cost $30 million to implement those across the Montana system. That's to get materials, that's to train up staff, that's to do everything you need. How much money is put into this year's budget to fund those changes for the next? There's one bill that funded $5 million, that would be special needs students. When the Columbia Falls case occurred in 2005, the district court judge said, there's a problem with special ed funding in Montana. Special ed funding always fights with general fund budgeting. And it's always coming up with it. There was another lawsuit in 2008. The judge looked at the new system that had been set up and said, study, funding study. Outcome, same special ed problems that existed back in 2005 and 2008 still exist today. Fast forward again to 2020, fast forward again to 2025. Special education funding still takes a haircut for districts, and you're either required to provide services at a decreased level, or you've got to take money from your general fund, which is supposed to be for other funding purposes. It's not accounting for everything. For Alberton, your special education funding from the state and the fully funded state components comes out to about $40,000 into your general fund budget. Your expenditures listed for 2024 for salaries and benefits was about $182,000. And then your other portion of that non-attributed salaries and benefits was about $5,000. So just in your general fund, right, just apples to apples-ing out those pieces, not worrying about other sources, you had a general fund deficit of $178,000, which is special education funding in 2024. Now, you might get other money from the feds, but that money also comes in and goes out on its own accounting. You might get it from your tuition money. I mean, you might be able to permissively levy your local taxpayers when you feel it's appropriate to do so. The problem is now you're slipping back into having an elementary. Right? You're telling your local taxpayers that their children can only get educated if they have special education needs, if they pay for it. Because that's the zip code that they're going into. And that's the zip code that they live in. And they would have a different situation if they live 7 miles down the road, or 60 miles down the road, or 200 miles down the road. That's the system that's supposed to be broken by City of Helena and by Columbia Falls, but we're sitting in it again today. English language learners, I know Alberton may not have many. It's becoming a 7%, I think, of the Bozeman School District now is Spanish speaking. The amount of money the state gives to that, even though it's set forth in the statute that they will provide money for it, zero. There's been attempts, and those attempts have been shot down every time. Gifted and talented, you have to provide, right, that funding up front here at Alberton as part of your, to get that grant, and it's a pittance compared to what you end up having to put forward. Many districts in the state just struggle with that. They're required to by statute, but they don't have their discretionary money. So those students identify as students deserving of, required to have gifted and talented education in the state. Don't get any funding from the state of Montana, despite the state of Montana saying it has an obligation to determine those costs, it has an obligation to fund them. Qualified staff. One superintendent that I spoke to, when I said, how are your hiring pools these days, said to me, we don't have a pool. I'm lucky if I have a window. Obviously, that's different from town to town, based on your rural status, based on your urban status. Urban schools are hurting as well, because the standard of living is so high, and they can't attract. Helena claims that you should get 100 teachers and hire those applying. They get less than 5. So, the state is supposed to be taking into account, right, what needs districts have in terms of attracting those personnel to schools. And that's not just teachers. We focus heavily on teachers in the past, and that's because they're sort of the bread and butter of our education system. But that's your superintendents, and how you keep quality superintendents here over a long period of time. That's your administrative staff, that's your support staff, that's your paras, right? That is a huge problem for districts throughout the state, is keeping paras employed. There was a fight earlier this, the last couple of years about what the starting salary for teachers in Montana was. It $34,000 to $38,000. But everyone agreed it needs to be higher. Right? And so that number has moved up. Some of the advantage now. With the ambitious goal, I believe by the fiscal year 2029, of having all of your entry-level teachers earning a minimum of $45,000 a year. If that holds true, right? If that's your competitive salary according to statute in Montana will still be in the bottom order if every other state in the area didn't raise their salaries at all in the next 12 years. So if you're losing teachers, right, to other states, and the state is losing teachers to other states, we are not currently funding our system in a manner that's going to attract or retain those teachers. Facilities and distance learning technology. So currently the state does not provide a mechanism for full-on facility construction. Right? That would be that if, God forbid, something went wrong with this building tomorrow, or you were at a point where you knew this building's lifespan was 1 or 2 years, you have one option. You got $12 million in bonding capacity to go ahead and see if your taxpayers can take that burden, even though there is no money coming from the state of Montana. It's in the statute. It's a constitutional mandate that the state has to provide. They determine what those costs are. But we get some major maintenance aid from the state of Montana for some of our large-scale projects. There was an increase this session, and essentially if you remove cost of about $1 million at the time of the money for the next 20 years. So one of the biggest liabilities we have across the state for our kids is facilities. The state did do a study, so they get credit on this one, in 2008 on facilities, nothing since. And that facility study said that between $360 and $400 million in outstanding liabilities across the state. And that wasn't even talking about new construction as far as I can tell. That number's gone up, right? That number's gone up just because either places have continued to not fix things, or things get older, or we all know that the costs of construction have gone up exorbitantly in the last 5 years. Districts that have been trying to pass levies, Eureka, I'll pick on them, made an appearance in Columbia Falls back in 2005 as having one of the worst facility ratings for its elementary school. That building is still there today functioning. They cannot get the money because the only way they can reconstruct that building or to be a safe, secure building is if they can get a bond pass. They can't get a bond pass. So those kids don't get a safe functioning school. Local control. Montana Supreme Court has said that districts lose their local control, that this piece of the educational constitutional mandate is violated when districts don't have the monetary capacity to make determinations on their own, right? Where their choices are dictated by the fact of what else are we going to do? This is the only money we have left. I haven't heard you guys speak about it tonight or seen indications in the past. Many districts in the state have gone to or are discussing 4-day weeks, consolidation. Right? For some districts, those may work. Right? For some districts, that's their choice. But you want to make sure that those districts have the financial tools and the wherewithal to make those determinations on a local level, free of that pressure. Well, we just got to go 4-day week because we just don't have enough time. We just have to consolidate because we don't have the other money. That's when you take away local control from school boards. So right now there's an interim study going on. And what we would like to see is school districts that are interested in standing up and saying, this system isn't working. And it's not just not working, the system is falling below the bare constitutional minimum that's required to educate our kids. Right? It's not a partisan issue, right? It's our communities, it's our students, it's our futures. It's something that our district, but this is happening everywhere. It's happening in districts across the state who have to decide if they're going to shutter buildings, go to 4-day school weeks, cut programming, lay off teachers. And the reason it got fixed in those prior times and the reason it was bumps in funding was because districts stood up and said, enough. And then what we saw was an uptick, and then we saw status quo, right? So if you're not thriving right now under this current system, you're not gonna thrive, right? Unless you just keep asking your community, because they're the only ones who can answer the phone on it for more and more and more money. So, on that happy note, and I apologize, I would love to answer any questions you have on any of that. It was a dump of information. Yeah.
At the end of this, are you guys just looking for one payout, or do you think it could actually change how facilities are funded, or make changes for everyone? What are you guys final?
That's a great question. So no payout. This isn't about, right, Albertson School District gets $50,000 and Missouri School District gets $1 million. This is about fundamentally saying the current funding provided to schools systemically isn't working. Now, it would not determine is the current system going to use, or should we tweak this, or change this factor, or do this or that. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is the current system today isn't working. And that could be something as, right, in the simplest sense, taking $1 billion and putting $1 billion more into the existing system, right, and just letting the numbers shake out the way they shake out. Or like was done in, right, in response to prior lawsuits, sort of entire rejiggering of the system. Does that help?
I have questions. If Alberton were to participate, is there anything negative allowed for highlighting of anything that's going on here that's going to reflect poorly or affect us?
So I'm gonna do the lawyer thing and dodge that one a little bit. And say that I think in terms of discussing what it actually looks like to be a client in these circumstances, I would say it falls into that question of litigation strategy. That I would say you have to have, in this context. So it's not that I don't want to answer your question, I just,
Okay.
I think that would be the appropriate place to do it.
I'm curious what everyone is also behind.
I can do it.
If anyone has any thoughts on it?
How many schools have said yes?
As of today, there are no school districts, one private parent.
How many schools have you presented to?
I would say schools probably, I would guess somewhere between 10 and 20 in terms of stakeholders, north of 70 to 80. That could be teachers, that could be advocacy groups, that could be parent groups, and sort of anybody else who's interested in these changes.
Is there a cost to the school for your representation?
That's a great question. No.
You get nothing when you win?
Legislators don't want to say anything?
Wait. You know, there's always, everybody always wants more money, there's always the money and where do you sort it out, and there's never enough. That's part of the problem, and I know there was a topic about, well, you set some away, but some of that is, it's the same thing on looking at the school fixtures. Some of that money is set away to fix things so that the deterioration doesn't keep getting worse and worse, and you end up replacing the whole house rather than just
all goes to, yeah, there's never enough money, and it's, I say we need education, that's the fundamental thing. It's just, everybody has a little bit different answer on how you're gonna do it. And, I'm not on the education committee, so I can't give you at the education budget committee, I can't give you the answers, dealing with something like this, but, the support for education is there, it's just, and that's one of the things, bringing up the pay for getting teachers, and to keep the teachers around, I mean, we supported that and tried to get, and got that in place. These are all just little steps, and I'm not dismissing and saying there is no problem, I won't say that, but it's just to come up with the right answers. It isn't as easy, and there are the sharper minds that work through some of those budget and education ideas that dealt with it over their lives.
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Holiday.
The holiday with health.
Oh, I'm just taking a moment, I think I know you're right. Anyway, he spoke about the decennial study that's happening right now, and I think there's a lot of emphasis around that time period in our state and what it's going to uncover in terms of understanding how we fund public ed. I was surprised to even see a news hit over the weekend. It could have been a story from last week indicating that the Montana Quality Education Coalition was prepared to come out in favor of, taking a stance in favor of a state sales tax if that funding was primarily directed towards funding state public ed. I was shocked. I was like, whoa, since when do the school people throw in on state sales tax? So you're going to see a lot of those kinds of things happening around this moment in time. In essence, they didn't come out and take that stance, if I understood correctly from the news story, because there were some complicating factors, but even just the suggestion of it and the coalition of folks under the Montana Quality Education Coalition suggesting it, that's a new move from the time that I've been in public ed in the state. But it's a lot of people trying to solve a really big issue.
Yeah, nobody's turning their back on it, it's just to come up with the right solution. Hasn't happened. And it keeps, every 2 years, there's more approach to trying to come up with that solution, but it still isn't. It isn't there. But the work hasn't quit either.
So have you represented other districts in the past with a lawsuit that you're talking about? Or is this the first attempt to do so?
Yeah, so no, not me, right? There've only been 2 lawsuits that have hit the Montana Supreme Court, the Illinois one back in the 80s and Columbia Falls in 2005. No one's brought a school funding lawsuit since Columbia Falls finished up in about 2008 or 9, maybe 10. No, so we have represented the MQEC, I think with regard to school choice vouchers, 393, which allowed parents of children with IEPs to remove their kids from the district and then take the district's money, so the district had to remove the money back to OPI for those students. So we are involved in that case, represented by MQEC, and then also another case involving
What do you see as like a victory if you were to move down the road? Do you think that this lawsuit is going to compel legislators to, are you going to change how they budget money for schools? What will you end up accomplishing with victory?
So, right, the big win, big unified win is there's no money for schools, right? That's one. The Montana Supreme Court said the state can't pay poverty on anything else. Schools come first. Right? So there's no religion, so probably that's big. The Montana Supreme Court A win is a declaration of systematic. So, sorry, I didn't explain that.
So basically winning is them taking a look at it and adjusting what they're doing or not doing. And that would be the win, right?
Yeah, and so let's go back to Columbia Falls, right? The court says you don't even have metrics of what constitutes quality education. So it's hard to say whether you're doing great at it or not doing great at it. So the legislature did that and created those metrics and said, here's how we're going to fund or meet those metrics, right? Some of them said things like, we're going to adjust for inflation because dollars are getting weaker on a lot of these areas. But there's a cap on inflation. So if you all were on the school board over the inflation spike years, and you don't get more than 3%. Right? It's frozen. You actually only get 2.4% unless the district passes an operational rate. 100%. Really, the governor's office's budget of the policy priorities said about $70 million on the table, right? It could have been funded. It could have been funded. But that's the gap between that 3% increase and what the inflation actually said school district should have gotten. It's just that there is a discretionary decision to not fund districts over a certain for inflationary adjustments. So that's money that on paper was supposed to go to y'all, it's supposed to go to your students. And it's supposed to go to your taxpayers, but we ask for things like additional operational budgets, additional bonding, additional whatever technology purposes, instead of having that swept off the table.
Any more questions? Any more points of clarity? Okay. In this conversation, now we're all kind of on the same page as far as this goes, so it's not something that just some of us are